The National Desk, America's News now.
From the nation's capital, this is the National Desk, America's News Now. I'm Dee Dee Gatton. Thank you for joining us. And on this weekend edition, we take a look at the big headlines of the week, and we look ahead at what to expect, starting with the four big stories we've been following this week. Trump and Harris vying for votes in a few key battleground states, how next week's debate could shake up the race. A 14-year-old accused gunman opens fatal fire at a high school in Georgia. Law enforcement experts detail how to differentiate a troubled kid from someone who's a threat. Jobs in jeopardy. Which middle-class professions could soon become extinct, and what to switch to if you're looking for a career change. And later, football season kicking off. The record amount of Americans, how much they are expected to wager on the nation's most watched league. The 2024 presidential campaign is heading into the home stretch with a mixed outlook across 6 key battlegrounds, according to new CNN polls. Vice President Kamala Harris has an advantage over former President Donald Trump among voters in Wisconsin and Michigan, while Trump holds an edge in Arizona. Harris and Trump split likely voters almost evenly in Georgia, Nevada, and Pennsylvania. The polls were conducted after the Democratic National Convention last month. With the debate rules set, both former President Donald Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris are gearing up for a one-on-one showdown next week. The National Desk, Matt Gelka, spoke with experts about what we can expect from the high-stakes exchange.
After weeks of goading, the stage is set in Philadelphia next week for the debate between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. It's a familiar place for Trump now. He debated Hillary Clinton 3 times in 2016, Joe Biden twice in 2020, and Biden again earlier this year.
I really don't know what he said at the end of that sentence. I don't think he knows what he said either.
Debate expert Alan Schroeder says the experience can help.
The pressure of a general election debate that's going to be watched by 50, 60 million people, even more possibly, that's very different from a primary debate or a local or state debate where you have, maybe a few million watching. It just, the intensity, the pressure, everything is exaggerated.
The intensity is ratcheted up thanks to an election season that saw President Biden drop out and Harris take his place during an unprecedented political month. It could be the only time Harris and Trump go one-on-one in person while making their case to voters. Their ads give a preview of the likely talking points.
And sometimes revenge can be justified.
He'll take control. We'll pay the price.
Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. They're failed, weak, and dangerously liberal.
Schroeder says the race to draw contrast with your opponent gets even tougher and has higher stakes when the campaign is shorter like it has been this year.
If people feel like this is the only time they're going to see the two candidates on stage together, I think you'll have many more eyeballs on this than normally we would expect. I think there's always some danger in just a single debate between two candidates, because if one of them has an off night, you don't get a chance to recover from that.
The debate features the same rules as the ones used in June. Both candidates will be standing, no note cards, and the mics will be muted when a candidate isn't responding to a question. The vice presidential candidates, J.D. Vance and Tim Walz, also debating. That one's set for October 1st. For the National Desk in Washington, I'm Matt Gelka.
New details. The sentencing for former President Donald Trump's New York hush money case has been delayed. A judge accepting his request to push the date from September 18th to November 26th after the election. Earlier this week, a federal judge rejected his team's request to move the case into federal jurisdictions. Trump's lawyer cited the Supreme Court's ruling on presidential immunity, but the judge said that ruling doesn't pertain to this case, as the hush money payments were unofficial acts. New developments, it's been more than 3 years since America left Afghanistan. And now Republicans want to question Secretary of State Antony Blinken about the chaotic withdrawal. The House Foreign Affairs Committee has subpoenaed Blinken to testify on September 19th. The subpoena comes as the committee is expected to release its investigative report on the withdrawal next week. The State Department says Blinken is not available on the 19th and has proposed alternate dates. The number of job openings shrank more than expected in July. According to data by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, they fell to an estimated 7.6 million from 7.9 million in June. The slowing demand for workers may be an indication the labor market is cooling. July's numbers are the lowest in openings since 2021. Now, with inflation ebbing, the data will likely give the Federal Reserve more justification to reverse course on interest rates. A number of middle-class jobs are in jeopardy, and they could one day disappear. That's according to the Labor Department. Office clerks, retail supervisors, and office administration supervisors top the list. If you're looking to make a career switch, other jobs are seeing an uptick, but they could require more training or education. Those include medical assistants, truck drivers, and construction workers. As we learn more about the suspected Georgia high school shooter, Colt Gray, his classmates are saying that he was a quiet kid, and when he did speak, it was usually just a few words. The National Desk, Jeff Harris, spoke with experts asking how someone can differentiate a troubled kid from someone who's a threat.
I'm told it's difficult to spot, but observation is key. Be on the lookout for any erratic behavior, out of control mood swings, or big changes to their appearance. Those are all signs that something may be off.
David Thomas, a professor at Florida Gulf Coast and retired law enforcement, tells us, aside from behavior, class assignments are another good thing to pay attention to.
They have to journal or they have to write reports. And what you'll find oftentimes they'll fantasize in those, and that's a window into what's actually going on.
When it comes to Colt Gray, there was a sign online. Over a year ago, Gray made online posts threatening a school shooting, but investigators didn't have enough evidence to make an arrest. And Thomas says in Georgia, there is no red flag law allowing someone to intervene and take the firearms.
If there are weapons in the house and they feel that those weapons, the person has access to those weapons and they're a threat, they cannot remove the weapons.
And in his experience, he says many times parents are also reluctant to intervene and get the child help.
The stigma was there. They thought that their kids, they wouldn't be normal. They wouldn't be readily acceptable.
Dr. Lee Richardson, a licensed counselor, tells us anytime a child makes a threatening post like Gray, there needs to be an evaluation.
A neuropsychological assessment must be conducted.
Because she believes if one was done, it's possible the results would have shown anxiety, depression, and some aggressiveness.
Something that could have made us stop and think, do we need to look at this a little more seriously?
Now, when it comes to those red flag laws, 21 states have the policy in place. It allows law enforcement and many times family members to petition for a court order to temporarily prevent someone from accessing guns. I'm Jeff Harris reporting from Washington.
This year's back-to-school trends may include cell phone bans. 72% of high school teachers say cell phone distractions, it's a major problem in the classroom, according to the latest Pew research. In addition to cell phones, wardrobe bans can include open-toe slide sandals and even Crocs. An El Paso, Texas middle school banned all black outfits because of an association with mental health issues like depression. Sweatshirts with hoods and pockets may be also banned to reduce opportunities for hiding prohibited items. Costco has raised its membership prices for the first time since 2017. An annual membership went from $60 to $65, and the executive membership rose from $120 to $130. The changes, which went into effect Sunday, will impact about 52 million memberships. It applies to new signups and renewals. Football season just kicked off, and the popularity of the National Football League is at an all-time high. The American Gaming Association expects a record-breaking $35 billion to be legally wagered this NFL season. Emma Withrow joining us now from the Fact Check team. I feel like we just blinked and it was September. Yeah. Let's start with the numbers. What type of ratings does the NFL actually bring in?
Lots. So according to recent Nielsen data, the NFL remains the most watched sports league in the U.S. by a long shot here. I mean, the average NFL game draws about 17 million viewers, which is more than double the viewership of the NBA and the NHL combined. Take a look at that graph on your screen. You can see that the Super Bowl consistently reaches more than 100 million people year after year, according to 538.
Yeah, we've always known that the interest has been there. We know that there have also been some scheduling changes. Is that a move to bring in even more viewership?
I think so, yeah. I mean, from the research, one possible explanation would be the NFL's strategic scheduling. Many of of their league's games are broadcast during prime time, so that's one there. There's also the level of fan engagement. So a 2023 report from Statista showed that 63% of Americans identify as some sort of an NFL fan.
Speaking of fan engagement, fantasy football, it's become a phenomenon.
It really has been. Yeah, the American Gaming Association estimates that I think there's around 60 million people who are participating in some sort of a fantasy league. I'm not, but 60 other million people are. So
we need a national desk fantasy football league.
I know we do.
Well, stay tuned on that. Emma will be back a little later on to break down the financial side of the NFL and sports betting. I think we do help well, but with no help from me. If you are noticing wait times to see a doctor face-to-face are getting longer, you're not imagining it. 17% of patients had to wait 1 to 3 months for a doctor's appointment, according to data from health records company Tebra. That's true for 26% of people waiting to see a neurologist. Same for those waiting for an ear, nose, and throat specialist. 20% for psychiatry visits, and primary care stood at 19%. The Supreme Court has ruled the federal government can cut off Oklahoma from funds for refusing to comply with a requirement. The Health and Human Services Department cut the state off from a $4.5 million grant for family planning services. Oklahoma would not follow the requirement to make abortion counseling and referrals available. The state also refused an alternative choice that allows referrals to a hotline offering multiple choices, including abortion. Up next on the National Desk, America's News Now. The White House resuming a controversial migrant-sponsored program. The new safeguards in place after concerns of potential fraud. Plus, 8 in 10 Americans will experience back pain in their lifetime, the most likely reason, and what you can do about it now. The Biden administration plans to resume an updated version of a program that allows migrants from Venezuela, Cuba, Haiti, and Nicaragua to apply to come into the country through a sponsor. Joining Jan Jeffco to discuss is former acting commissioner of Customs and Border Protection, Mark Morgan.
DHS discovered tens of thousands of suspect applications, including hundreds, really, Mark, that were traced back to a sponsor using some commercial warehouse addresses, others who had sponsors that had Social Security numbers from dead Americans. Texas and 20 other states have sued the administration, arguing the program's scope exceeds the administration's authority. So what do you make of all this?
Once again, Texas and these states are absolutely correct. It's a clear violation of law how the Biden and Harris administration is using the parole statute. Parole is supposed to be used on a case-by-case basis for a limited public benefit parole. What this administration has said is you're just born from these 4 countries, that's good enough. Well, that's not what the law says. And from day one, we knew the way they were applying it, it was fraught with peril and it was going to be abused. And we saw that. We saw some people that hadn't lived in one of those 4 countries for over a decade, yet they were still able to avail themselves of the parole program. And I think what's also frustrating here is that they're simply just lying to the American people. For example, we know that right now the fixes they've done is literally like putting a Band-Aid on a cancer patient victim. But they need this because it's part of their shell game that they've been lying to the American people. As they're telling the American people the numbers in between the ports of entry of the southwest border are going down, they're allowing 30,000 individuals from these 4 countries to fly into one of 45 airports, but they're not telling the American people about this. And the last thing that I'll say is vetting. Jan, you and I have talked about this multiple times. As the Venezuela gang TVA are spreading out across America, they're still allowing Venezuelans under this program to come into one of 45 airports, and they do not have the ability to properly vet them. They are intentionally and knowingly allowing violent criminal gang members into this country under this program, and that's a fact.
And this is tens of thousands every month?
30,000 every month, Jan.
Meantime, California Democrats have approved a bill Mark, to help illegal immigrants buy a home. The program offers no interest loans of up to $150,000 to cover a down payment and fees. Now, Republicans argue the program doesn't have enough money as it is to meet the demand and would unfairly take away loans from U.S. citizens. What's your thoughts on this?
Yeah, it goes in the category, you can't make this up, right? Think about this. What the Democratic Party and the Biden-Harris administration are telling the American people, they're so concerned and so dedicated to finding out the root causes, right? Well, here are the root causes. We have an administration right now that fully supports giving free education, free health care, free driver's license, free housing, and now free no-interest loans to illegal aliens. And then we wonder why the flow of illegal immigration has exponentially increased under this administration. Yeah. Jen, you and I talked about multiple times. It's common sense. You don't have to be a border security expert. If there's zero consequences for criminal activity and yet we reward it, then you're going to get more of that activity. That's exactly what's happening.
Elon Musk tweeted half of Earth should move to California, given all the incentives to do so. Meantime, it's not just members of Congress in the U.S. concerned about national security. Lawmakers in Canada also sounding the alarm after suspected terrorists were captured there, which comes as nearly 1,100 suspected terrorists have crossed from the northern border, or as one report put it, slightly more than one U.S. Army battalion. Why are we seeing this record number of migrants on the terror watch list at the northern border there? How are they able just to roam free in Canada before U.S. authorities are catching them?
Well, again, we don't talk enough about the northern border. And again, common sense is if your policies incentivize illegal immigration, you're not just going to incentivize on one aspect of our border, right? That's going to happen to all borders. And our northern border has been an issue for a long time. The Hill just put out an article last week that described Canadians' immigration policies, quote, as since the 1970s, Canada has been cultivating some of the most liberal immigration policies in the world. And under Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, it's gotten even worse. Just last month, they identified an Egyptian son and father that was plotting a terrorist attack in Canada. Well, guess what? In 2024, they admitted the Egyptian father as a U.S. Canadian citizen. Oh, and guess what they found out? That in 2015, there's a video of this man actually dismembering a prisoner in an ISIS video. And right now, under Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, they're actually expanding the number of Palestinians that they're allowing into Canada. Yet they have no ability to properly vet them and determine which ones are pro-Hamas or which ones aren't. That's why it's very important that we have to secure our own borders and take our own national security into our hands. We can't rely on other countries to do it for us.
And Trudeau getting a lot of heat for that this morning as well. All right. Former Acting Commissioner of Customs and Border Protection and visiting fellow at the Heritage Foundation, Mark Morgan. Always great to see you. Thanks for joining us.
You bet. Thank you.
A few simple stretches might be the secret to beating at least one kind of back pain. Medical reporter Liz Bonus explains why they work.
Hey there, everybody. Sciatica pain, one of the most common complaints we have these days, according to physical therapists, and it can be caused by a number of things.
So sciatica pain is typically like a shooting or a tingling pain down your leg.
Courtney Neeson of Ohio's Mayfield Brain and Spine says this kind of pain comes from this side nerve, the sciatica.
This is your sciatic nerve here.
Pain occurs, she says, when the roots to the sciatic nerve, which runs down your legs, becomes pinched. It can happen from a number of things, including how you sit at your desk.
We always like to say feet flat on the floor. So bring your feet underneath you a little bit, and that can take some of that stretch off of that nerve that goes down the leg as well.
But she says a few exercises can also help, like this one that strengthens your core or center muscles. Or one that looks like this that helps stabilize your hips. And she says several stretches, or what she prefers called nerve glides, can also work.
Just kind of a little bit of background on nerves. We always compare them to dental floss and how you want, when you floss your teeth, you want it to go kind of back and forth without getting stuck on anything. So your nerves are very similar in that they do move, but they're a little different than muscle, where muscle will stretch, but a nerve doesn't really like to be stretched. It does have a little bit of a give to it, but its job is more so to move along its pathway rather than kind of stretch and come back together.
If you do need help learning some of these moves, your doctor can refer you to a physical therapist. With your health news, I'm Liz Bonus reporting.
Up next, animal shelters across the country are feeling the burden of the economy. Why one California shelter will soon have to close its doors for good. Plus, Oregon is making sheltering the homeless a top priority. The emergency funding being put up to make that plan a reality. The National Desk team of reporters is bringing you the headlines from coast to coast. We're taking the pulse of America, and we begin in California, where the economy has taken its toll on a local animal shelter, highlighting problems no-kill shelters across the country are facing.
Valley Animal Haven has been taking in and adopting out animals in Lemoore for the past 10 years. But the economy has taken its toll on the no-kill shelter. Recently, it stopped taking in animals.
It's really hard for us to turn away people when we can't help, when we don't have the ability. Our resources are stretched as thin as they can be when we have 180 animals on site.
Valley Animal Haven operates with just 4 staff members. Jackman says the pandemic created unforeseen economic problems for all animal shelters. Her operating budget has been a constant sea of red.
Month to month, we're looking at about a $5,000 to $7,000 deficit that we're operating at, and it's been consistent since, I want to say about 2022. If the donation status doesn't change, we got about 6 months left under our belts. So 3 months, like I said, to get to the end of the year, and about 3 months to make sure that everybody's taken care of before we have to close our doors permanently.
In Texas, Bexar County commissioners voted to pay a private company to help register voters. Residents are upset, claiming the firm Civic Government Solutions has ties to the Democratic Party. This has caused some within the county to question the motives of the company and its CEO, Jeremy Smith.
It is emphatically true that he is partisan, that his organizations are partisan. He's getting data from taxpayers.
And Smith says that despite claims of his partisan views, he works to help candidates from both parties to get elected, and his company is not involved in those efforts. In Oregon, making sure there are enough shelters and beds for the homeless population has become the state's top priority. The state recently announced it will allocate $65 million towards opening new shelters and maintaining existing ones.
This is a critical safety net for folks who are experiencing unsheltered houselessness, especially as we look at the fact that we're going into fall and winter coming up soon.
Any money that goes unspent by the shelters will be used towards rent assistance programs, according to state officials. An asteroid was spotted hurling towards Earth. Up next, stunning visuals show the moment it entered our atmosphere. Taking a look at the top trending stories on our website right now, the NFL will once again broadcast every game of the 2024 season on the Armed Forces Network. Overseas audiences will be able to stream all 272 games for free. A driver who crashed his tractor trailer into a highway sign in Virginia earlier this week has been charged with reckless driving. Authorities say it took almost 90 minutes to remove the bed from the sign. After closing multiple locations this year, Red Lobster says it's poised to come out of bankruptcy soon. New leadership says a simplified business plan will help the restaurant stay afloat. Those stories and more available right now at thenationaldesk.com. New details. A small asteroid on a collision course with Earth burned up in the atmosphere this week before it could reach land. The fireball was spotted, look right here, by a NASA-funded project in Arizona, and it ended up fizzling out over the Philippines. Discovering an incoming asteroid before it strikes Earth is extremely rare. This was only the 9th ever that has been identified before impact. A familiar favorite is coming back to Southwest Airlines. The return of its Companion Pass promotion, effectively a buy one, get one free offer for Southwest members. After you buy tickets for yourself, a ticket holder's fellow passenger can come along on unlimited flights for a couple of months early next year. Members of the Rapid Rewards program would need to book a round trip or two, one-way tickets, by the end of Thursday for travel through November 20th of this year. You're watching the National Desk, America's News Now. You can catch us live weekdays from 6 a.m. to 11 a.m. and 10 p.m. to midnight Eastern Time and anytime online at thenationaldesk.com. We'll be right back.
The National Desk, America's News Now.
Voters are worried about the future of the economy more than any issue this election cycle. The presidential candidates reveal their tax plans as the campaign trail heats up. 3 gun shops are under fire for allegedly selling firearms to a known weapons trafficker. Why officials say the shops must be punished. And a doctor is accused of removing the wrong organ, which resulted in the death of a patient. How what was meant to be a routine surgery turned into anything but. From the nation's capital, this is the National Desk, America's News Now. Thank you for joining us. I'm Didi Gatton, and as we come back on the air, Democratic presidential nominee Kamala Harris rolling out another part of her economic agenda this week from New Hampshire aimed at boosting small business. Voters are paying close attention to both Harris and former President Trump's tax plans. The National Desk, Atra El-Nashar, has a closer look.
The presidential candidates' tax plans are in focus this week. And while, if elected, their proposals would need congressional approval, they do tell voters what their priorities are. Vice President Harris announces she wants to give new small businesses a $50,000 tax deduction for startup costs, 10 times the current benefit, and cut red tape on working across state lines and filing taxes.
As president, one of my highest priorities will be to strengthen America's small businesses.
Harris also supports a White House budget proposal that includes having wealthy Americans who are worth at least $100 million pay taxes on unrealized investment gains. But some of Harris's big donors, and even one of her own campaign surrogates, aren't sold on the idea.
Let's say you're an entrepreneur. You create a company. It gets to 100 million or 200 million on paper. Now, if you're taxing that, you're probably going to force that person to sell it.
Thank you very much, everybody.
On the Republican side, not everyone's happy with what Trump is putting forward, a universal 10 to 20% tariff on goods coming into the United States. And if they're from China, an additional 50 to 60%. Earlier this year, Trump told Time magazine, and a lot of people say, oh, that's going to be a tax on us. I don't believe that. But these tariffs would cost the typical middle-class household at least $1,700 in increased taxes each year, while inflicting significant collateral damage on the U.S. economy, according to the nonpartisan Peterson Institute for International Economics.
Just going to cost countries that have been ripping us off for years, like China and many others, in all fairness to China.
Trump also aims to revive his 2017 tax cuts, which experts say would only partially offset the cost of those tariffs on the middle class, but would bring bigger benefits to the wealthy and corporations with the goal of promoting investments. Both candidates have a lot to answer for when it comes to how they'd pay for these plans or how much they're willing to add to the national debt. They'll likely be asked those questions when they debate September 10th. In Washington, I'm Atra El-Nashar for the National Desk, America's News Now.
The Harris campaign also kicked off a weeks-long 50-stop reproductive freedom tour this week in West Palm Beach, Florida. Democrats see abortion as a winning issue since Roe v. Wade was overturned in 2022. It's been a tough sell for former President Trump, who takes credit for the demise of Roe. But he also recently said he thinks a 6-week ban is too restrictive.
We think that women should be able to make their own decisions about their health care and not politicians. And it doesn't surprise me that Donald Trump was messing around with this last week.
Vice President Harris has not specified the number of weeks when she thinks abortion should be legal, only saying she supports enshrining abortion rights into federal law. New details: Washington, D.C., the state of Maryland, and Everytown Law are suing 3 gun shops for allegedly selling dozens of firearms to a gun trafficker. The lawsuit claims Engage Armament, United Gun Shop, and Atlantic Guns, all in Montgomery County, Maryland, ignored clear signs that a straw purchaser was buying guns to traffic them into D.C. The D.C. and Maryland attorneys general say Demetrius Minor was able to buy 34 semi-automatic pistols over a 7-month period.
It doesn't take a lot of common sense to figure out that someone trying to repeatedly buy the same semi-automatic handgun over a short period of time is a straw purchaser and is buying the guns for illegal purposes. And yet, all 3 of these stores ignored the red flags.
Minor was prosecuted in D.C. in 2022, but now officials say the gun shops must be held accountable. The gun shop owners have yet to comment. Ukraine's foreign minister has resigned. Dmytro Kuleba is one of the most recognizable Ukrainian leaders on the world stage. But Kuleba decided to step down from his role this week and did not give a reason. This comes before Ukraine's cabinet gets some expected personnel changes ahead of what President Volodymyr Zelensky calls an extremely important fall season.
And our state institutions must be set up so that Ukraine achieves all the results we need, all of us. To do this, we need to strengthen some areas of the government, and we have prepared personnel decisions.
Kuleba was in the role since 2020. A Ukrainian leader says lawmakers will talk about the resignation at their next session. New information: a former aide to New York's Governor Kathy Hochul has been charged with being a spy for China. Federal prosecutors say Linda's son worked as an undisclosed agent of the Chinese government. shaping state messaging to align with PRC priorities and blocking access to Taiwanese officials. Sun held multiple government positions in New York over the course of 15 years, including Deputy Chief of Staff for Hochul. The governor's office says Sun was fired after evidence of misconduct was discovered. The NFL has become a cornerstone of American culture with record-breaking earnings and an ever-expanding fan base. Emma from the Fact Check team joining us now. This NFL season is expected to spur a record $35 billion in legal sports wages. How does that compare to years past? It seems like it's growing.
I know, it just keeps going up. According to the American Gaming Association, these legal sports wagers spiked by about 30% compared to the $26.7 billion that we saw last season. NFL-related bets make up roughly 40% of the whole sports betting market in the U.S.
And with more states, of course, legalizing sports betting, they're set to benefit even more. How much revenue does the NFL generate on its own?
It's pretty unbelievable when I dug into the numbers just on all of this. So according to Sportico, the NFL made about $18 billion in 2022, which makes it the highest grossing sports league in the world. Most of that revenue comes from media deals. For example, in 2021, they signed a bunch of broadcast agreements worth over $110 billion with networks like CBS, Fox, NBC, that type of thing.
The NFL has been growing, expanding internationally. Has it been lucrative, or are Americans the only ones interested in tuning in for that?
Surprisingly, it has been. They've held matches, I believe, in Mexico City and in London, and I think that they generated in 2023 around $800 million, so lucrative to say the least.
Yeah, that is very impressive. Emma, thank you. And for more on this Fact Check team topic, including links to their sources, scan the QR code on your screen or visit thenationaldesk.com. The parents of an 8-year-old boy are calling him a hero after he sprang into action to help his dad in an emergency. The man was working on a roof in the backyard of the Rhode Island home when he took a fall. Barks from the family dogs prompted him out of a shower and into the backyard, says 8-year-old Nova Nesenzi. Keeping his composure better than some adults would, Nova worked to keep his father awake while scouring the house for a phone to call 911. It's training his parents say he had been briefed on in the past, but not the extent of his heroism that day.
So we do talk about it here and there, but we're not, you also don't want to freak your child out. So it's a fine line. But now I recognize how important those talks were.
Dad, Ben, was rushed to the hospital where he needed 9 staples in his head. Now a week into recovery, though, he says he is proud to call his son a hero. Developing now, a Florida doctor is being accused of removing the wrong organ from a patient during surgery, allegedly resulting in that patient's death. The National Desk, Karis Harmon reports.
Beverly Bryan and her husband Bill traveled from Muscle Shoals, Alabama, to enjoy a vacation at their condo in Destin. While they were there, her husband began feeling pain on his left side.
So we went to Sacred Heart on the Emerald Coast, and he was admitted and became a patient of Dr. Sheknovsky's.
After running tests, she says, doctors identified a cyst that had ruptured and bled around his spleen. She says she wanted to bring her husband back to North Alabama to see his own doctors.
I tried to convince Dr. Sheknovsky to let me take him home or arrange for him to be transported, but Dr. Sheknovsky said that Bill would bleed to death if he was moved.
On Wednesday, August 21st, Bill underwent surgery to remove his spleen. By that evening, Bill was dead.
They took him from us while he was completely helpless on the operating room table. They removed his liver instead of his spleen. So, of course, he bled to death on the operating room table. Everyone knows you can't live without your liver. It's about the same thing as if they had pulled out his heart.
According to a report from Ascension Sacred Heart Emerald Coast, Dr. Thomas Sheknovsky is identified as the primary surgeon. Attorney Joe Zarzer, who was hired by the family, gave us what is called the operative documentation from the hospital. It details the operation and what led up to it. The document reveals Bryan was admitted to the hospital on August 18th. It indicates several tests were done, including an MRI and a CT scan.
My client went to Sacred Heart Emerald Coast with right flank pain, discomfort, and he was treated, and Dr. Sheknovsky recommended that he go through a splenectomy, which is removal of the spleen.
When Bryan went into surgery, Zarzer says that's when something went wrong. The report says Bryan lost a lot of blood during the procedure and his blood pressure dropped, abruptly sending him into cardiac arrest. Efforts to resuscitate him were unsuccessful, according to the document. Zarzer also provided the surgical pathology report from the hospital that showed the organ labeled spleen was something else.
Dr. Shachnovsky was intending to take the spleen out. When the spleen was sent to pathology at the hospital, the pathologist at the hospital, after the procedure was over, said this is not a spleen, this is a liver.
Zarzer pointed to the operative document, saying that's not what the doctor reported.
The doctor reported as if it was a spleen complication and that the patient had actually died from a spleen operation that went bad, right?
I know I'm not the only wife that has lost her husband suddenly, but the loss of my Bill was exceptionally unnecessary and brutal.
She wants, I would too, right? She wants the criminal case to proceed. She wants a culpable negligence case on the criminal side. And she wants everybody, whether it's one doctor or doctors and nurses or multiple doctors and a hospital. She wants everybody to be held responsible so that they don't let this happen again. Your risk management team shouldn't be more robust than your credentialing team at a hospital.
Ascension Sacred Heart Emerald Coast did not answer our questions about the incident or about Dr. Shachnovsky's relationship with the hospital following the incident, releasing only this statement. Our thoughts and prayers are with the family. Sacred Heart Emerald Coast's leadership is investigating this matter. The Walton County Sheriff's Office is also investigating Brian's death. In a statement, it says it is reviewing the facts to determine if anything criminal took place. The agency also asking for the public's patience, as it says these cases are, quote, extremely complex and take time to investigate. Brian says her husband leaves behind 3 children and 8 grandchildren. She described him as honest, kind, and dependable, saying he deserves justice.
Our family and community is devastated by what's happened, and we feel that it is our duty to spread awareness and warn others.
Still to come here, our team of correspondents breaks down this week in Washington, from the race to the White House to the fight over DEI policies.
And welcome back. Our Washington Bureau covers the nation's capital every day, and our team of correspondents reports on the important issues facing the country and how they impact you. Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump meet Tuesday at their first presidential debate in Philadelphia. National correspondent Matt Galka, you'll be there covering that pivotal event. Tell us how the candidates are getting ready for Tuesday night.
Yeah, a couple very different strategies. Donald Trump will tell you he doesn't need to prep. He's been there, he's done that, he knows the topics, so he doesn't need the prep. So for a lot of the past week, he's actually spent a lot of time trashing the network that the debate's going to be on ABC. He's alleged that they're going to help Kamala Harris get some of the questions in advance. He's also talked about the friendship that the head of the network has with Kamala Harris, and there's been multiple articles that they've been friends for 30 years. Of course, ABC News is saying that that executive does not have any impact on the news-making decisions. So Donald Trump hasn't been hunkering down. He's been out and about, and he's been talking a lot about this upcoming debate. Now, for Kamala Harris, she's been in Pittsburgh. She arrived on Thursday to kind of hunker down and do some more debate prep. She's been prepping before that. Apparently, there are reports out there that there's been a stand-in for Donald Trump to mimic the role that they're going to play. So which strategy is going to pay off? Well, we're going to find out at the big-time debate this week.
Yeah, and it's notable that the debate is in Philadelphia, polling suggesting Pennsylvania may be the state that decides the presidential election. Matt, a bunch of new polls out suggest that the Keystone State and several other battlegrounds are up for grabs.
Yeah, and you mentioned the number of polls, and look, I'm not the type of guy who wants to spoil the ending, but I will say right off the bat, all of these different polls are adding up to the same thing. We're tied, essentially, based on a number of metrics. I'll give you an example here. CNN poll this week that says Harris was up in Wisconsin and Michigan, Trump was up in Arizona, and they were virtually tied in the other key states of Georgia, Nevada, and Pennsylvania. Another YouGov poll, though, said Harris was up in Nevada, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, and Trump was up in North Carolina, Georgia, and Arizona. Those all are considered the swing states that could end up deciding this election. And again, I'll go back to what I said at the beginning. We don't know. We don't know right now. It's basically a tie. It's a dead heat. And some people are even saying it might be the closest presidential race, if not in history, at least in very recent memory.
Well, and let's point out, when you say someone's up, someone's down, we're talking about 2 points, 1 point, 3 points, all within the margin of error in a lot of these places. So the up and down, this is statistically tied in almost every one of these battlegrounds and in the national polls. So, like you said, dead heat. We're going to be probably watching this one until the end and maybe counting way past Election Day. We'll see what happens. Meanwhile, Molson Coors becoming the latest U.S. corporation to end its diversity, inclusion, and equity programs, or DEI programs. National correspondent Kayla Gaskins, what's behind this movement to pivot away from DEI?
And Steve, this is just the latest in a trend that we've seen going on for the past couple of months. So what Coors announced was that they're doing away with their DEI training. They're also going to do away with their diversity quotas for suppliers, and they're getting away from this inclusion scale. This is a score that's given by the Human Rights Campaign. Now, this push away from DEI has been happening, like I said, all summer. We've seen companies like Harley-Davidson, John Deere, Ford, Jack Daniels, Lowe's, Microsoft, as well as Tractor Supply, all do away with these DEI initiatives that really started to gain popularity in the summer of 2020 after the death of George Floyd. But after the Supreme Court's ruling on affirmative action regarding higher education, we've seen this start to speed up. There's also been the help of some lawsuits in there as well. Now, the Human Rights Campaign did respond to this. They're the ones that do that inclusion scoring that these companies are now doing away with, and they wanted to remind the public that the LGBTQ plus community has a lot of spending power in the American economy. It's worth more than $1 trillion, and they said that they are taking note and they will change their purchasing habits if necessary, if all of this stuff does go away, which again, Steve, it does look like it is. And the lawsuits also not helpful for the DEI for making any kind of progress there. These companies are getting hit. They're expensive. They're starting to really feel the pressure of this pushback even with consumers. We saw this happen with Bud Light last year as well. So as far as the DEI trend, it looks as if the train is leaving the station and not turning back anytime soon.
Kayla, Matt, great stuff as always. Thanks for your reporting and your hard work. Back to you.
Up next here, the carjacking problem in the nation's capital. What's next for a D.C. man who had his car stolen not once, but twice? Plus, viral trial. The suspect caught on camera attacking a Las Vegas judge returns to court. This is the National Desk, America's News Now. We have reporters all across the country in your neighborhoods covering issues that matter to you. From concerns over border security taking center stage in Pennsylvania to a man stealing a car twice in Washington, D.C. We're taking the pulse of America. But we start with a trial in Las Vegas for a man seen in a viral video attacking a judge in the courtroom.
The trial of Deabra Redden now underway in a Las Vegas courtroom. The case made national headlines in January when the 31-year-old appeared before Judge Mary Kay Holthus. She was about to sentence Redden in a separate battery case when this happened. Redden lunged at the judge, slamming her head against the wall before he was subdued by officers and others in the courtroom. Fortunately, the judge wasn't seriously injured, but the video quickly went viral, seen by people all over the world. Redden has pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity. His defense lawyers say he was in a delusional state when he attacked the judge.
The Secure Border, Secure America campaign was created to inform voters about border security and urge congressional action. Tuesday evening, the grassroots organization Americans for Prosperity met in Pittston with residents and a former border official to raise awareness.
We can bring them subject matter experts like Chief Chris Clem, who can share what's actually happening on the border.
And a lot of them are coming from countries that aren't big fans of the United States, and so there is that threat.
Chief Clem worked under President Clinton to the first 2 years of President Biden's term, citing progress for most years.
The 4 out of the 5 administrations that I worked under were making progress to secure the border.
However, Clem says progress has shifted over the past few years, like in Aurora, Colorado recently.
Putting a lock or putting a gate on the front door of this country should not be a bad thing. It is about protecting America, which is the government's #1 job.
I'm just rolling with the punches, trying to take everything one day at a time.
Meet Brett Sprinkle, who woke up in his friend's Southeast DC apartment last Sunday as if it were any other day.
I woke up really early, about 8 a.m. I was going to make us both breakfast.
But breakfast got delayed.
I noticed that my car was not where I left it, which is right here. And I didn't even break stride. I kind of just turned around, walked back into his apartment, and said, hey, I think either my car got towed or it got stolen.
Sprinkle, who works with our partners at the National Desk, called Metropolitan Police, who tracked down the car within days. But what could have been a happy ending right then and there was anything but.
As I was on the phone with my insurance company to let them know that it was being towed away, they called me, or the police officer called me back and said, excuse me, sir, I'm so sorry. There was somebody actually already in your vehicle, so while I was waiting for the tow truck, he started it and took off with it again. It's doing everything that I could never give it, crime spree. I was notified by a detective that I was used in a robbery. I was also notified by another detective just yesterday that I was involved in a shooting. Thankfully, I did ask, nobody was hit, thankfully.
Coming up next, craving a move in your golden years? The top spots to truly enjoy your retirement that could actually be affordable. Ahead to stories making headlines this week. On Monday, the federal trial is set to begin for 3 of the 5 officers allegedly involved in the beating death of Tyree Nichols. The former Memphis cops are facing civil rights violations. Tuesday, Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Trump are scheduled to debate for the first time. The event will take place at the National Constitutional Center in Philadelphia, starting at 9 p.m. on ABC. Wednesday marks the 23rd anniversary of the September 11th terrorist attacks. Biden and Harris will visit Ground Zero, the Flight 93 Memorial in Pennsylvania, and the Pentagon. Ready to pick up and retire? Florida, Minnesota, and Ohio took top spots for 2024's best places to retire. Take note, this according to Wallet Hub. Orlando is the #1 place to live out of the list of 182 cities. Fort Lauderdale, Cincinnati, and Minneapolis also made the top 10. Cost of living, tax laws, quality of life, available activities, and healthcare quality were all taken into account to come up with the rankings. And that'll be all for us on the weekend edition of the National Desk, America's News. Now, don't forget, you can catch us live from 6 a.m. to 11 a.m. and 10 p.m. to midnight Eastern Time. Check your local listings. You can also watch us online and catch up with the latest headlines on thenationaldesk.com. Thanks for watching the weekend edition of The National Desk. I'm Didi Gatton, and from all of us here, have a great week.